All right, we can continue. All right. So we already talked about physical development and all that, and the brain. So let's continue talking about reasoning power. So what I wanted to bring you guys to bring your awareness to this is that a lot of times adolescents, human adolescents, don't have the ability to think long term. Okay, don't have the ability to think long term. Again, this is not an indictment against you guys. I'm just talking in the abstract here. Okay, just be aware of that. But a lot of the times, um, human adolescents, especially ones that are male predominantly, may make decisions that may get them in trouble in terms with the law. And sometimes they may actually end up taking the life of someone else. So what happens a lot of time is that some of these teenagers may be going to jail and may be put on death row. A lot of the times we ask ourselves, is that appropriate? Is it appropriate to do that to somebody when they weren't sure exactly what they were doing? Now, am I saying let them off scot-free? No. But again, these are things that we all need to think about. As you get older, as you guys already know, life isn't black and white. There's a lot of different gray areas. Life is complicated and it's never easy. Anyone who tries to tell you that life is easy, they don't really know what they're talking about. Life is hard. Life is complicated. Okay. So again, we talked about these right here. As you get older, as you start developing your mental faculties, you start trying to decide what is right and what is wrong. You start thinking about what is morality. We obviously know that stealing is bad, but what if you are super starving and you just want to go into the store and steal a 99 cents loaf of bread? Is that bad? Obviously, pre-conventional morality, we would probably think, you know what, that's you shouldn't be stealing, period. But again, you start rationalizing and realizing that some of these things are you got to do what you got to do, right? And again, this time in your life, and I'm now speaking directly to you guys, is very tumultuous because there are moral norms that you were raised with, right? And then these norms are being challenged by your peers and by what you witness in the greater society. And as you start digesting these and thinking about these, you start asking yourself, is that correct or is that incorrect? Should I do this or should I do that? And that's the kind of struggle that I do not envy you with because I remember going through this myself when I was your age. Um, there's a lot of morals that our parents try to embed in us. But as you get older, you will realize that maybe you have to make your own decision as to what works for you or does not. But being aware that everybody goes through this just helps a little bit. Okay. So here are Kohlberg's levels of moral thinking. So obviously, pre-conventional morality begins around the age of 9. And that's main focus has to do with what interests you yourself and trying to obey the rules so you don't get punished. That's the biggest thing right there. So for example, if you save your wife, you'll be a hero. For example, before the age of 9, if I pick up my dish after dinner, I will get a dessert. That's obviously pre-conventional morality. Now, right now, you guys are developing what is known as your conventional morality, upholding laws and rules to try to gain approval from your peers around you and trying to maintain the social order. And again, I don't envy you right now in your era in life because it sucks sometimes. It sucks being a teenager. I was just like you guys, except I had longer hair, way longer, all the way here. Um, but again, you're trying to follow the rules. You're trying to do what's right because you want to go ahead and fit in in your social group. So obviously, if you steal a drug, everyone will think you're a criminal. And then as you get older, after you're an adolescent, and I would say, and I would even venture to say that adolescence, I'm not saying in terms of physical or mental development, but just development overall, it probably doesn't end till you're like in your mid 20s. Um, for me, from my perspective, college is sort of an extension of adolescence and high school years in a way. Okay. The old joke about junior college was junior college is just like high school, except there's ashtrays. That's all they say about junior college. So Again, people have a right to live. So these are very basic examples of the different levels of moral thinking: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Okay, you guys right here are in the middle. And when you get a little bit older, in your 20s, maybe early 30s, you're going to get your post-conventional morality. Okay. Like always, go ahead and send me a message in the chat box if you have a question. So now, what is moral intuition? What is moral intuition? It's basically your gut feeling. All right, your gut feeling. Ladies have a more highly developed moral intuition or gut feeling than men do. All right. Again, it's not an indictment, I guess, against us mutants, because technically males are mutants. You may be asking, what do you mean, Perez? Well, females are XX chromosomes and males are XY. So when you lose that leg on the X and it becomes a Y, that makes us a mutant. So, anyways, it's a joke, has to do with biology. You can laugh or ignore it, whatever. But gut feeling is something that develops with time as you gain more experience and as you become more attuned to what's going on around you. It doesn't spring up overnight. As you get older, your gut feeling will get better and will mature, which will prompt you guys to actually engage in moral action. Okay. But it takes time to get that gut feeling. And it also has to do with experience. As you get older, you get more experience, right? So let's talk about module 52, talking about adolescence, social development, and emerging adulthood. So, what is going on right now in human adolescence? We're going to be talking about three different things: describing social tasks and challenges of adolescence, because it's not easy being a teenager. We're going to talk about contrasting your parental and peer influences, because there's this constant struggle, whether you admit it or not, between what your parents are trying to tell you to do and what your peers are trying to tell you to do. There's always this constant struggle. And talk about the characteristics of what it means to become an emerging adult. So let's go ahead and take a look at Erikson's physiological development in terms of stages. So basically, from when someone is born all the way to 1 year old, the whole issue you have is trust or mistrust. Um, for example, we're talking about, can someone be depended upon to help and provide that baby with whatever they need? Right now, this is the age of my 2 year old, toddlerhood, 1 to 3 years old. Basically, can you be independent, or are you always going to be ashamed and have doubt of yourself? So basically, toddlers trying to do whatever they want or being doubting their abilities. That's what we have right here. Preschool, taking the initiative versus being guilty. That's the one right there. And you have another the description of the task. And then elementary school, basically, can I do it or am I a dummy? That's what inferiority means right there. And then the one you guys are right now, and like I told you guys, adolescence sort of goes all the way into your 20s, all the way up to college in a way. Trying to identify who you are and try not to confuse yourself in the terms of what role you fit into a social group. So the example or description they give you here is a teenager working at refining their self by testing roles and then integrating to form a single identity, or they become confused about who they are. For example, I'll just give you guys an example of myself as a teenager because it pertains to this. My freshman year, I dressed as according to the culture. I tried to dress in cowboy boots and cowboy shirts and all that my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I became a grunge guy. I started listening to rock music and becoming a grunge kid. And that lasted all the way till I was to almost a senior in high school. And then eventually, by the time I became a senior in high school, I started being able to meld both of those styles to form some weird hybrid style that I dressed up when I was a senior. Why did I do that? And again, I'm psychologically analyzing myself. My freshman year, I was trying to conform to what my parents wanted. You know, they wanted me to dress more traditional, boots, cowboy hats, and all that. But when I was in a sophomore year, I met friends that liked rock music, and I wanted to be more like my friends. It wasn't until around when I was a senior that I finally found a way, and I found a compromise between those two, trying to fit into what my friends were cool with, but also at the same time trying to appease my parents. Okay, and again, you guys are probably doing that right now. Okay, and that's just a very normal part of life. When you're in your young adulthood, your 20s to your early 40s, apparently I'm in that one right there. Trying to find intimacy and trying to be by yourself again. And that's the struggle right there. So again, at this point in time, adults are struggling to find a relationship, trying to find intimate love, and trying not to feel socially isolated. And then let's get into the really scary one. We're talking about middle adulthood, 40s to 60s, stagnation or generating something new. And has anyone ever heard of the term midlife crisis? Yeah, the whole joke is, oh, that guy is 50. Now he's driving a Ferrari, and now he has like a 20-year-old girlfriend. That's weird. That's gross, whatever. A lot of times when people are going through a midlife crisis, they are reflecting back on their life and saying, nothing happened. I'm getting old. And that's basically someone going through a midlife crisis trying to get back that youth that they once had. And then 60s, all the way up to when we pass away, integrity versus despair. This is when people start reflecting on their life and trying to find a sense of satisfaction or realizing they were failures. Ms. Price, your face says a lot. What's going on?
I don't know. I have trouble with the thought of like growing old. Like just thinking about like it just makes me want to throw up a bit. Like growing old is like weird to me. Like being like the way that I view my granddad, who was like all like old and holly and stuff. I'm like, I never want to get to that stage. Like I don't want to die young, but I don't want to like be old.
Well, I will tell you this. If it grosses you out getting old, and you don't want to be like, I mean, I'm guessing is your grandfather in ill health or what's going on?
Yeah. No, he's like like bad. Yeah, it's been for like years. So it doesn't set quite a good example of being old for me. So like I don't know. I just see old people and some of them like old people and some of them I'm like oh don't wanna be that. You know? I don't know. I feel like being young and watching somebody get old and older and advancing, you're just like it's like scary. So I wouldn't want to do that.
Well, then what I would advise you, Ms. Price, and to all of you guys, if you don't want to be like some older people that are old and infirmed, you need to take care of your health. You need to work out. I'm not saying go to the gym 3 hours a day, but you need to do some workouts in order not to get old. Some of the health figures, and I know I'm going on a tangent right here, some of the health people I follow on Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook, they are 60, 65 years old, and they can do more pull-ups and more push-ups than I can still. They are old in terms of number, but I bet you they can probably outrun most of us here in this Zoom meeting. They can probably work out harder than we can. So that's the only remedy to getting old, I would tell you guys, is to eat healthy, be as healthy as possible, and keep working out. If you don't want to do that, then you're going to get old and crotchety. So the best way not to get old is to keep exercising. So when you are a teenager, you're still trying to figure out who you are and trying to form an identity. I sort of give you guys an evolution as far as how I was in high school, which was weird because by the end of high school, I wore combat boots with cowboy pants. I'll explain later what cowboy pants meant and then like wearing Nirvana shirts. So it's like it was a weird style, and I was trying to develop my identity. But now I would not do that at all. That's just weird. Why would I do that? But most of the time, people your age again talking the abstract, human adolescents are always trying to find out who they are, how do they fit in within the greater society, and again trying to figure out how they fit in. So sometimes you might start hanging out with a certain group. Obviously, this is before pandemic and post-pandemic, but you're going to start hanging out with people and trying to figure out who you are. Are you going to, and remember back before we went on lockdown, how at lunchtime, if you ate at lunch at school, there was always these different groups at lunchtime hanging out under the tree by the art building, or hanging out by those concrete benches by the cafeteria, or hanging out behind the library at lunchtime. Each of these different groups had different social roles and had different social identities. And even those people in that group, they try to identify who they were. One of the reasons I always love walking around campus during lunchtime, not just because I like getting in my steps, but because I like people watching to see the social interaction of different people within the groups. And it was always so weird how you can always tell how males try to communicate their affection for other males. Males are not going to tell, hey, dude, I love you, man. They're just going to, hey, man, you smell so much, or you look ugly. Again, insults for males are basically us being low key, hey, I like you, but I can't say it out loud because that's weird because we're not supposed to say that, right? Again, intimacy. Right here, we're talking about at this point in time, we all know this. We probably lost friends in high school because they got a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Anyone ever experienced that? You had a really good friend, you guys were really close, and all of a sudden they got a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or they got a significant other, and then you never saw them again, right? You never saw them again, and then all of a sudden they pop up again, like, hey, how's it going, man? Like, what happened? Well, he or she broke up with me. You're like, ah, all right. What do girls do? Like, oh, what happened? Talk it out. What do guys do? Oh, that sucks, man. She's probably a female dog and all that, huh? Just weird. But again, during this time period in your life, and you're going to continue to develop your sense of intimacy and what you accept as you get older. But again, high school is the time period where you start developing and start thinking about what does it mean to be intimate. Okay. And I'm not talking about physical intimacy because that one's easy. I'm talking about emotional intimacy and mental intimacy. Those are the most scariest ones that anyone can be put themselves exposed to. Okay. And I'll say it again because it's worth noting. Physical intimacy is very easy. Anybody can do that. But what's really hard, and it's really hard to develop this skill in a sense, is to be emotionally and even more scary, mentally intimate with somebody. Okay, because that's honestly those are deeper levels of intimacy than ever a physical sense of intimacy can bring you. Because sharing what you're thinking, sharing your emotions, bonds people more than ever a physical sense of intimacy can. All right, let's see what we else got going on. So let's talk about your parents and your peer relationships. So we all know, including myself because I did this too, that around this time period, when you guys are going through adolescence or when someone's going through adolescence, it is marked by a time period where adolescents start pulling themselves away from their parents. They don't want to hang out with their parents so much anymore, right? So right now we have a 2-year-old daughter. She loves being on her mom all the time and being around her. She loves being held. When she becomes a teenager and goes to high school, she will probably not want me to hug her when I drop her off at school. She would, or if it's a boy too, they probably won't want me to tell him, hey, I love you, son. I love you, mijo. I love you, hija, daughter. They probably won't want me even to drop him off at school. Okay? They'll probably, oh, just drop me off at the parking lot. Don't even walk me to class. Just leave me alone. And again, this is perfectly normal behavior. Why? Because again, at this age, human beings, adolescent human beings, are trying to assert their independence. And how do you do that? You start pulling away from parents. And parents, maybe after the second or third kid, they will realize, you know what, that's just a normal part of human behavior. Okay, it's normal, And then maybe misprice your parents. Go, no, why are you not talking to me? But it's perfectly normal for people your age to pull away from your parents. What's ironic, and I will tell you this from experience because my wife and I were reflecting on this the other day. She was just like me, where I pulled away from my parents. And then now that we have our own kids, she's very close with her mother and father. Very interesting how perspectives change. Okay. I'm not saying this applies to everybody, but for the most part, within the bell curve of normal, remember that? That's what happens. Okay. And what happens is at this time and period in your lifetime, your peers, people your age, are going to exert a greater influence on you as a human being and in your development, which is perfectly normal. But if I can put on my parent hat, that is scary. That is very scary because I don't know who these kids are. I wouldn't know where were they raised, what intentions they have. So again, be very. I'm not saying give your parents a full pass on this, but be aware of and take this with a grain of salt that your parents, for the lack of a better word, are freaked out because they don't know who is talking to you and telling you what to do. They don't know. Okay. And it takes a lot of trust on a parent's part to trust that they did their job in raising you. Okay. So you just got to be aware of it. I'm not trying to apologize for your parents' being weird or anything like that, but I'm just giving you guys a perspective from myself being a parent and telling you as an AP psychology teacher, that's the kind of thinking that's going on at that time. All right, so let's go ahead and continue talking about emerging adulthood. So basically, emerging adulthood is more of a modern thing because we're talking about modern culture where it's your mid to late 20s. So this is basically talking about your college years. And again, just because I say college years doesn't mean you have to be in college. We can call this post high school and pre marriage, I guess, if you want to call it that way, right? Or pre 30s. So we're talking basically about your 20s. You're no longer in high school. So fast forward maybe for some of you guys, not 5 years. For some of you guys, 3, 4 years, you're going to be in your 20s. All right. You're no longer going to be a teenager. You're going to be on your own. Some of you guys are going to be living far away from home, attending college. Some of you guys will still be at home, attending college or working or whatever. But this right here, your mid-20s, is a very important time period in your life. Okay. So let's put it this way. Childhood in various different stages from birth all the way to around 12. And then from 13 all the way up to around 19 or 20, that is your adolescence. And then your emerging adulthood is basically the most part of your 20s. What is the 20s identified with? You're starting to learn how to become more independent. Hopefully, by this time in your life, you're not really depending on mommy and daddy anymore. Again, that's the hope. You're starting to get your own job. You're starting to get your own place. You're starting to develop relationships with other people. You know not to who you can date and who you shouldn't date. You know what you want. You start developing your own personality. And that is basically what we're talking about your emerging adulthood. All right. So here we have your emerging adulthood and how it differed back in the 1890 versus 1955. So let's take a look at the 1890 picture right here. Let me go ahead and get my marker. This one right here. So we're talking about women right here in 1890 and women in 1995. Back in 1890, girls got puberty later on in their life, maybe around the age around 14 or 15. All right. And then see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15 or 16. And then let's go ahead and take a look at what happens more modern times. 1995, I know it doesn't seem very modern, but that's the most recent information we have. Puberty reached at age 12 for girls in more modern times. Now, why is that? There's a couple of reasons why, and I'll explain to you guys why. Nutrition, food, okay? Again, I'm not telling you guys go ahead and be a vegan and eat all organic and all that, but some of the food that we do consume nowadays does tend to have a lot of human growth hormones. So a lot of cows, sometimes in agriculture, they try to manipulate the animals so they can grow faster and produce more milk. That some of that residual food gets consumed, or some of those residual hormones get consumed by human beings. So that probably has to do with the reason why girls reach puberty earlier now in life versus back in 1890. The other thing you'll notice is that girls in 1890, or women, would get married at the age of 22. And if you look at now, around 1995, see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, around 25. That's what the study says. So what's interesting is that now in modern times, puberty for women is achieved earlier, but marriage occurs later on in life. Contrast that to what happened in 1890, when puberty was reached later on in life, but marriage was much more occurred also at an earlier age. So this has to do with nutrition. It has to do with the changing culture and social norms that we have now. Piece of advice: I hope you guys remember this when you guys are in your late 20s. Study has shown that the ideal time period for you to get married, or for a person to get married, and to make sure that the marriage is a long lasting and happy one, between the ages of 28 and 32. Because that shows you've already matured yourself, emerging adulthood. You've already established yourself as a reasonable, responsible adult. Again, there's always outliers. It's not always the same, so just take that with a grain of salt, okay? All right, that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow, talking about sexual development. And with that, we are done for today. I'm going to exit. Let me go ahead and stop this presentation. It always takes a while because it's being